going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me for another video. As always, if you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Leave me a like on the video as well. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps me out. Today I'm going to go over a new accessory that we have for the Rebel 500, and obviously right here in front of us we have the Puig touring windscreen. So as far as I know, this windscreen comes in two variants. It comes in a naked version, which is like a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit narrower, overall same design, and then the touring here is the taller of the two. Obviously, with the word touring implied, it is made for longer riding and therefore should block more wind, especially on the highway. I still do have the eBay, cowl type quarter fairing that I had up front there that you guys have seen in the previous video. I took it off mainly because I was beginning to have some rattling with it and it was really getting on my nerves. I did leave the ring on the headlight in case I ever do want to swap between the two. It just makes it a little more fast for me that I can swap without having to put that ring back on. What made me pick up this windscreen is obviously I do a lot of highway riding for my work commute. I use this bike at least 5 up to sometimes 6 days per week to go to work. And being on the highway at 75 plus miles per hour, especially when I'm traveling north in this particular direction, the wind is horrible. And when you're riding a naked bike or a cruiser that doesn't have any front protection, I mean, sometimes it can become unbearable. Like, you just feel like this ginormous kite catching all of this wind. And with a lighter bike like this that doesn't have a whole lot of horsepower, you find yourself fighting the wind by using more throttle and all that. So what I was hoping to get out of this windscreen is just a much more comfortable and relaxed ride when I'm on the highway. I just wanted to take as much of this wind turbulence off of my chest as I could. Now, this windscreen goes for right around $120 online. I actually found mine on eBay used, and it was up for auction. The starting bid was like $45 or $46. So I placed a bid, and I just figured if anybody outbid me, I wasn't too worried about it. I just let it go. Well, funny enough, nobody bid, so I ended up winning it for like 46 bucks, which is a killer deal. I mean, it's in good condition, no major scratches, all the hardware is there. The only gripe I had is it did not come with the 2 bolts and the spacers that were needed to mount it to the top of the triple tree clamps here. Now, fortunately enough for me, my old Duke 390, I had a Puig windscreen on there as well, and funny enough, since I had to replace that windscreen during my accident because I bent the mounting tabs, I had some extra hardware laying around, and the bolts, as far as the length and the spacers, are exactly the same. So I was actually able to use a spare set that I had laying around. Fortunately, I didn't throw those away. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on talking about what you guys are probably the most curious about. Is it worth buying one? Does it work? Is it taking the load off of your chest? That kind of thing. So what I can tell you is I've had this on here for a few days now, and I've ridden the highway about 3 times, and that's still 150 miles worth of highway for me. And what I can tell you is it has taken a ton of wind load off of my chest. Now, where has that wind load gone? It's kind of redirected it up towards maybe about chin level for me. So I feel a lot more of the wind on my helmet. Now, that's perfectly fine in my case. My Shoei RF 1200 can deal with wind very, very well. I would not say that the ride has gotten any noisier. The only difference is that you notice a little bit more vibrations off of your helmet because that wind is now hitting the helmet directly, and it's being directed up towards there. Overall, it's not a bad trade-off. It definitely feels a lot better than having all of that wind hit your chest and your head. And I guess one of the other plus sides with having it redirect that air up towards my helmet is I've noticed that the other day it was pretty hot, so I opened my brow vent, which I normally, I rarely ever have them open. I opened them up, and the first thing I noticed was how much more air it felt like was going over the top of my head. So with that air being directed towards my helmet, the scoops at the top of my helmet for that vent seem to be picking up a lot more air than they normally did than when I just had that smaller little cowl on here. Now, that's kind of going over the air as far as vertically, right? But what you don't really expect, or don't really, I guess, think about going into this thing is how wide it is. So funny enough, it actually does cause a little less turbulence on my jacket. Like my arms down here, my jacket used to puff up a lot more, catching wind going inside of my arms here. And yes, they still do bounce around and they do catch some wind, but it's a lot less than it used to be. Now bear in mind, everything that I've been going over, I am 6 foot tall, so if you're a shorter rider than me, your experience is going to vary a little bit. And I can go ahead and kind of duck down, and I can see, like, if you're shorter than 6 foot, or you're at 6 foot, maybe 6'1", I can even sit up a little bit. Hell, maybe even taller than 6'1". This thing works. Okay, now one thing that I'm actually really enjoying about this is, I don't know about you guys, but every once in a while, you know, I get an itch like on my nose, or, you know, somewhere on like my upper lip. And, you know, unfortunately I can't stick my fingers through the bottom of my helmet because I have that chin curtain there. And so I really want to scratch it sometimes. And, you know, if you open your visor on the highway, you better be prepared to take an eye full of wind and possibly, you know, some debris. So it's not a good idea. Well, the good news is, with this windshield, you can actually tuck down behind here, and I can open this up and scratch my chin, or, you know, my nose or whatever, and it blocks everything. It's fantastic. And I guess if I really wanted to, you know, get behind it during a rainstorm, I could do that as well. Fortunately enough, it doesn't rain a whole lot in California. It did rain last night, and it seemed like it wanted to sprinkle a little bit this morning, but, you know, for the most part, when it looks like this outside, it's just for show. It's not actually going to rain. I will say the one area of concern that I had going into this windscreen was the design aspect. I didn't want to make this bike look like a, and I can't find a better term for it, but I didn't want it to look like an old man's bike, like an old Harley, you know, like a really old Harley cruiser with the big ginormous windscreen on the front. I was really worried that it was going to take away from like the badass styling of this bike, you know, the bobber type styling. And while the other windscreen that I have, that short little one, does look more badass on this bike, the looks of this one are growing on me. And the trade-off for the functionality of how good it feels on the highway now when I'm commuting is a fair enough trade-off. It's a way more than fair trade-off for me. So there's my fair analysis of the Puig touring windscreen for the Rebel 500 and Rebel 300. Honestly, I think it's a great buy. It does look and fit a little bit better on the 2017 to 2019 bikes. I've seen people kind of complaining about how big the gap near the headlight is on the newer bikes that have the LED headlight from the factory. But on this bike, I think it fits really well, and the design aspect is growing on me. It doesn't look too bad, so for the money, having that kind of wind protection on the highway goes a long way, trust me. Like I said in the beginning, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I'd really appreciate you subscribing to the channel. We just crossed 2,500 subscribers earlier this week. I'm super stoked to continue to see the channel grow. You guys are making my dreams come true. You have no idea how much I appreciate your support. And don't forget to leave me a comment down in the comment section. I usually make sure to try to reply to all of them. I try not to miss any. I also like, or at least love, every single comment that comes through. And as always, guys, I'll see you in the next video.